Welcome to one of the last two events today. Just very briefly, I want to say I've had a really great day. I hope you all have as well. Quite exhausting to take so much in, but and so many great conversations that I've had, but also watching everyone else having. So for me, it's been a wonderful day, and I'm delighted that I can finish this day with a great friend, Dmitry Shishkin, with a fireside chat, and Dmitry has come with his fireside cardigan. We should have one of those nice flame projections at the back, and a glass of whiskey. But anyway, the whiskey can wait. Dmitry is going to, well, he can tell you what he's been doing in the last year or so, but Dmitry is somebody who has been in very serious newsrooms like BBC World, and has been on a really interesting journey over the last 10 years. He was responsible for one of the best bits of media or journalism research, I think, that's ever been done. It was such a neat idea, which was to ask the newsroom what kind of news they created, whether it was kind of update me news or whether it was about trending, or whether it was about education and so on. But then asking the users of that news what kind of use they made of the journalism that was being created. And of course there was this disparity between the two, and I think it was a really effective way of thinking about journalism. And obviously since then, with the explosion of generative AI, we have all been thinking much more about what are we creating and how can we connect it to audiences. So we will be talking about how you might reinvent the newsroom once again. So welcome, Dmitry.
Thank you very much.
First of all, tell me, what have you been doing this year?
So I've moved back to London about
welcome back
5 weeks ago. Thank you very much. I spent the last year and a bit in Switzerland working for Ringier, which is a media holding owning companies in various countries. And I was running their non-Swiss media, and I'm going to become a consultant again from January onwards, working for I prefer to work with tech companies, media companies, and companies that would care about content but are not publishers themselves. So, travel, finance, anybody else who basically wants to connect with the audiences with content. And you mentioned user needs, and sometimes I'm thinking, like, what the hell would have happened if I had been sick on that day when an audience research person came to me and said, there is a wonderful idea I have, do you want to have a look? And I'm thinking, you know how many times audience research people come to you with interesting things that they have found out. And the last 10 years have been really big, excellent experience actually from this experiments in the BBC, and then Reuters Digital News Report had a whole chapter last year dedicated to user needs, and then I really wanted to retire afterwards because I'm just thinking I've taken it like as far as I can really. But AI now brings a completely different dimension to the same problem. Ultimately, the problem is why you exist in the world, why you exist in the market, why your media exists in the world, because a lot of people who are successful can explain that in one sentence, and a lot of people who are unsuccessful, it starts with them unable to express why they exist, and we can't afford that in the LLM world.
Yeah, we'll come back to the Ringier playbook that you created in a minute, but first let's just go bigger picture, because I've been around longer than you, but we've both been through quite extraordinary cycles of change. We've been in it and we've watched it in terms of obviously going online, social media, smartphones, and of course AI. How do you think, and I know it's a very general question, but how do you think this cycle of AI change compares to that, and then where do you think we are in, whatever you want to call it, the cycle of hype, this current iteration of change?
We probably are facing the hardest challenge yet, because at least the previous challenges have been not as fundamental as this one, because you really kind of, everybody uses the phrase news avoidance, but actually there is nothing avoidable about news. You just need to write it in a particular way that people connect with. That's it. That's as simple as that. And we can learn a lot from many other providers, you know, including creators, of course, but also other sectors as well. So I actually am very excited about the changes that we can make, but the changes probably only we will be able to make them only if we put a lot of effort in unseen things, in the under the hood things, in the preparatory things. Like, you know, everybody talks about clean data, for example, but it's very hard to get your data clean, especially if you're a legacy organization. That's why I'm so excited about I'm so inspired about this day today, because I learned a lot, and we all must learn from the smaller newsroom, the better lessons you can learn from them, because they actually are not inhibited by all of those things. I remember when I brought Chartbeat into the BBC didn't have an editorial analytics tool up until 2013, and it took me 9 months from meeting Tony Hale until we went live. 9 months, and I wrote like 5 white papers explaining why it's needed. And by the time 5 people signed up for that paper, the first person who signed up already has new doubts and all of that. And come on, you can't afford to do that. You can't. I mean, you obviously have the different side of spectrum where all tech companies will come to you and say, "Oh, it's just only one line of JavaScript. It's very easy implementation." Well, bullshit as well, right? So it's not that as well. But because obviously you have compliance, you have data infosec, all of that type of stuff. But the issue is that we spent at Ringier, we spent a lot of time last year cleaning up everything to do with our under the hood stuff to make sure that we are much more visible to LLMs, we are much more transferable in terms of our data, so data can talk to each other. People learned the difference between ontology and taxonomy, you know, all of those kinds of things. Really, really important ones, because if you want to become more effective, you need to produce less, but make content work much, much harder. And it's an amalgamation of technology on the one hand and better editorial, much better editorial on the other hand, because frankly speaking, the editorial broadly is still broadly beige. And that's why niche organizations do it much better than generalists.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. Of course, there are different speeds of travel, we don't call it. And as you say, some of the smaller organizations can be more nimble. But where do you think it's over 3 years now since ChatGPT was launched? How would you sort of describe the I mean, there was a kind of efficiency stage,
yeah.
And then is there a transitional phase? Where are we?
So I'm really excited about the next year, because yesterday something happened that I was expecting to happen about maybe 6 months ago, when you remember when Trump was named the Person of the Year by Time Magazine.
Yeah.
Time Magazine created this first ever multimodal experience of an article. And everybody was like, wow, this is what the future of journalism, blah, blah, blah. Time, of course, their corporate communications, of course, didn't say that they only did it for one article, because they didn't productize the whole thing. But yesterday, I think they announced that now it is going to be applied for everything. And this is what really is important, because you of course need to be creating everything that, say you create 100 articles a day, you probably will create, I don't know, 800 versions of those articles in this new multimodal world. But what I think that media is completely missing the point, it's not about you can write an article, you can read an article, you can watch an article. It's like it's so basic, like why are you even talking about this? This is much more than that. You need to look at every single variable you have for an article, for your URL, and make sure that multimodality includes that variable. So what I mean by that is that if something happens, you can have an educate me piece created as a first-person video, and you can have an update me piece written as a 200 words, or you can have also a give me perspective piece delivered as a Q&A, for example, all together. But all of those things only can happen if your ontology/taxonomy is clean enough, so you can say, okay, well, I need to make sure that my 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever it is, third-party tools that interact with my content, they actually are able to talk to each other, because currently they're not. And I think we will be able to unlock a lot of potential by making sure that all of the data lakes which we're gathering about our content and our audiences actually start talking to each other.
Yeah. And do you think, in a sense, then, that we haven't actually made the intellectual leap, have we? We're still, we've been writing the obituary of the article for some years now, but it seems to be still very alive, this idea that there's a sort of central artifact, and occasionally you might translate it.
Yeah.
You know, you might do a short version.
Yeah.
But we're still thinking in that way, aren't we?
I don't have a problem with that, because I think the majority of people still prefer to read based on what
Well, I don't just mean a text, but I mean one object that is the story.
I understand. I think that everybody talks about unleashing the power of archive, and what we mean by that, and somebody said it today in one of the presentations, is that the fact that you can go into archive and dig out something which you think is the most important one is not something that actually will be beneficial to the audience widely. So I think that there is a lot of work to be done with archive and making sure that we get the best out of it, but also deliver it to people who actually need it at first. And yeah.
Let's try and break this down into sort of different concepts, if you like. And I'm sort of going with the taxonomy that of your beautiful glossy Ringier playbook, which go and search for it. It's a wonderful piece of work trying to understand a new strategy, not just for AI, but in the broader context. You spoke today about how exciting it was to see some of the smaller newsrooms who, generally speaking, are operating in some kind of what we used to call a niche.
Yeah.
But is there a sense that niches aren't just for small organizations?
I actually think that we all need to become as niche as we can, irrespective of how big we are. We literally need to become an amalgamation of 50 niches if you are a generalist website, but you don't, there is no such thing as a website delivering news for 50 different audiences or 50 different topics. You basically need to treat your health vertical, which is actually not niche because you can go even niche, but they will be competing against the whole of health coverage across the globe. So I think that we need to look at how AI can help us keep coherence of the brand overall, but still you need to make that mental shift for thinking that I only am responsible for politics coverage or health coverage or sports coverage, but I need to be competing against everybody else in the world and produce the best content out there possible. So,
and of course you're competing, not when you say competing with, you don't just mean other journalists.
No, everything. I mean, Spotify, Netflix, books that you read online, whatever. We used to remind everybody that news only amounted to 2% of world internet, and that was like 10 years ago. So now I don't know, it's like 200% maybe. So I think that it's really important to recognize what you are and what you're not on a niche by niche basis for the organization as a whole. So I remember consulting for one of the organizations, and we got together 3 senior editors responsible for 3 verticals that they had, and I asked them to come up with unpack a vertical for me into 5 or 6 topics, and then agree on a level of the board that those 20 topics or 18 topics are the only thing that we do, but we do them the best we can. And that involves curating of the best content out there, because obviously you need to show the world what else is out there available. Your editor needs to become the front face of the coverage, and I think it's really important to also say it's okay to have AI to help us curate that coverage, because we actually will then only concentrate on 2 or 3 pieces a day, but which will be our own original, the best there is. And be confident in that, because the issue is that a lot of newsrooms probably just, you know how this famous phrase is that, but we have to cover it. I remember it forever, and I come from a public service organization. I used to be digital editor for all language websites at the BBC, and it was like, and I really wanted to tear my hair out, and I mean, it turned grey already, right? Probably with the BBC as well. But if you say, but we have to cover it and we will have to write it, it's a wrong way of thinking about this, because you have to write it, yes, but write it in a way that actually makes sense to people. Just writing it for the sake of it being there doesn't really help anyone.
Yeah. And going back to the audience thing, what I really liked about the user needs model was that it sounds like you're sort of saying, oh, we've got to do what the audience wants. But it's really much more, isn't it, about trying to relate it back to what the newsroom is trying to do.
It's actually completely opposite of that. It's a little bit, reminds me, so 2 weeks ago, I went to Lisbon to take part in DigiDay Summit, and I had the audacity to say that the next editor-in-chief should be appointed from audience department. And people, they did a write-up on that, and they decided to make it a little bit more controversial than it was by calling my comments controversial. And I was like, show me at least the first person, one person, who will disagree with what I said. I didn't say that the audience, the editor-in-chief needs to come from audience. I didn't say that. I said your audience, a person who runs your audience team, provided that they are fully editorially sufficient and editorially sound, they have more competences than your generalist running your business sector or section or economy section. Why? Because they, at some point of time, they were kind of going producer, assistant producer, well, senior producer, assistant editor. Then they got stuck. Then they moved over to audiences. They started running audience department. They got exposed to maybe 5 or 6 other disciplines which regular editors never got exposed or never have a conversation. So, and then suddenly they say, I actually now going to apply for editor-in-chief job. So that person will be probably several times more qualified than your regular beat editor. Yeah. Why? Because they are aware of that modern journalism is just much more than just output.
What does the audience mean, or that audience relationship mean in the age of AI? Because we've got all that audience data, that's wonderful. We've got these tools that can personalize content. Yep. Is that what it is?
No, I think it's more than that. It's actually placing audience and getting audience to tell you what they... So, 2 examples. We brought Harkin into the BBC many years ago. Harkin, if you don't know Harkin, you should, because it's one of the most important audience engagement tools out there. Official BBC editors were publicly quoted as saying, I would never have considered writing that article thinking that the audience might be interested in that. And the audience was interested in those articles, and they were generating like millions of page views. So firstly, you need to kind of climb down from your high horse and say, actually, I will audience take a decision on what I consider important, because I will say that, okay, I don't have money to send 5 correspondents to 5 cities in the States to cover the States, but I will give the audience a chance to select out of those 5. I will select those 5, but I will ultimately let the audience decide. So ultimately, it's the same thing. How on earth, why am I getting all of the things on TikTok 48 hours earlier than on mainstream media? And that reminds me how I was still in my home department of BBC Russian in 2009, and I was kind of suggesting stories which I read on Twitter, and they only would write about those stories 36 hours later. It's exactly the same situation, because people are there, people talking about those things, and why am I seeing BBC report on TikTok about how horrible it is to have a boyfriend? Have you seen that trend? All of that? I've seen it 48 hours before, and then suddenly a BBC correspondent does it. So, like, fundamentally something is broken. You need to get those stories and those conversations into your mainstream coverage much sooner. And that's what I mean by placing audience in the middle of it. You really need to have... Another really good example of how BBC wanted to become audience-centric is that when we launched BBC Pop-Up around the world, when we got into a place in the world and we got people to use post-it notes to write what is the most important topic in their own town, and then BBC would go and cover it. So we still will apply all the editorial relevance and the logic and moral and all of those and ethics and everything else, but the stories need to come from people who you are covering it for.
And the other sort of leg of your little, your four-point playbook was obviously what we're here for today, largely, I guess, which is artificial intelligence. How impressed are you by the way it's been used?
Well, sometimes I just need to tone myself down in terms of what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is that like let's be realistic. All the stuff that we have done so far, whilst it's amazing and really great that we have done it, all of that thing about efficiency and transcriptions and like headline writing and all that, it's super boring. It's incredibly boring. Nobody cares that the fact that we have like 3 headlines to choose from. Okay, well, firstly, you can write those 3 headlines yourself, and it's a different thing that maybe AI will actually help you afterwards to say what we know about this topic and what we know about the cohort of audience. This headline will be the best, and that is the good use. But I'm thinking multimodality is something which I'm really excited about. I think that we need to, in order to really take advantage out of multimodality, we need to tag our content based on formats. which not a lot of, how many newsrooms are tagging their content with formats here? By formats, I mean things like feature, interview, you know, how many, so one in the whole room. Like if you have the golden triangle of content evaluation is topic, user need, format. If you don't tag according to those three things, you already are missing on a lot of nuances. So I think that what we can do better in the future, multimodality for 2025 will be about that. But also I think it's about the decision making based on AI. Effectively, what we're saying is that the human brain is not able to calculate as fast as machines. And if you come to work, and when I was at Ringier, I actually asked all my newsrooms to introduce a new editor for like a day job, saying they were notifications editor. So they were getting notifications live from the editorial analytics tool, and they were basically immediately reacting to those notifications. So, and those notifications, and you can ignore it at your own peril, but the same editorial analytics tool will send you a report at the end saying, we have sent you 60 notifications in a day, and you only reacted to 10 of them, and because of that, you missed on 500,000 audience or something like that, you know? Yeah. So decision-making based on AI, which comes through the human brain, is going to be the next big frontier for me, at least.
Yeah. And any particular examples where you're particularly excited? Do you think people are getting it? Always unfair to ask.
Well, you know what, interestingly, okay, well, let's talk, BBC Polska was mentioned in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced, frankly speaking. I've spent so many years improving BBC language teams around the world, and I learned only one thing, which what really would set them apart is relevance in their own market.
Right.
So just providing foreign language, well, firstly, majority of competitors in Poland probably already have gone to bbc.com and already translated everything they wanted to translate, right? So like, what's the point? I don't really understand. But you need to have, of course it will help you. So it's 80-20 rule. 80% of your content in Polish will be automatically translated and offered, but you still need to have 20% which are fully original and fully yours.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good example, isn't it, of the difference. I mean, it's a great thing they're doing.
Yep.
We're delighted that it's happening, but it's a kind of two-dimensional usage. It's not to criticize it, but it's a kind of two-dimensional thing. You've basically taken what you have and you put it in a different language. Yeah. It's not doing much.
Which Google Chrome can do.
Yeah, yeah. Cruel, but cruel. I'll come to questions in a minute, but I'm enjoying this. But the fourth leg of this quadruped policy is culture. What do you mean by that?
So when I wrote this continuation of the playbook, first thing was obviously the niches, the second one was the audience, then the third one was AI, and the fourth one was culture, was actually was all-encompassing, right? So it's exactly to my question early in the first session of the day, how do you make sure that people actually behave differently in your newsrooms and think differently? And what I mean by that is that we all need to agree that job descriptions are gone and solid reporting lines are gone. Because one of the things is that whatever you have been hired to do today, you might not need to do in 6 months' time. And the truth about the workforce in general is that you still spend a lot of time dancing around people, asking them to do something different, which actually is not aligned with their job description 100%. And I think we can't afford that, I remember I was trying to combine radio operation and digital operation in BBC Russian in like 2008. And I asked people to move rooms and everything. And one guy said to me, this was my view for the last 25 years. I want to continue seeing this view from my window. And I'm like, okay, well, we have a lot of work to do, you know? Yeah. But so for me, those answers about, you know, courage, curiosity, actionability, or willingness to change, it's exactly the right thing. So I would hire only for one thing, because I think that skills can be taught. Yeah. Attitude can never be taught. So flexibility is the most important thing, whatever flexibility means. Flexibility should be, you need to hire people to constantly ask them, give me examples of how you have been flexible in the last whatever.
But it is also about, I don't know what you call management, leadership, changing the structures that people are working within, isn't it? I mean, a newsroom that I used to work in 20 years ago has only just said to its broadcast producers that they will also have to work on online. I just find that kind of mind-blowing.
So do I. In 2006, BBC was going through this thing where the term was introduced called 360 degrees commissioning. Remember that?
Yeah.
So I thankfully was that person. So I was able to go on a trip, film myself, broadcast myself, write a video article, write a text story myself, answer people's questions myself, all of that. So when I was starting going through the ranks at the BBC, I think people remembered me as doing those things, and they had trust in me not to bullshit them and not to ask them unreasonable things. And I think this is really important. So at Ringier, one of the things I did was to rename audience engagement people into editors. I actually said to them, you can't use the word audience engagement manager, because as soon as editor talks to a manager, you know what happens, right? So like you need to have a equal playing field. So audience engagement editors to start with. So we're Homo sapiens, words matter to us. You really need to say this is audience engagement. They're as editorial as you, effectively. So flexibility, getting people to, well, one thing which I suggest in my playbook is that every single senior person needs to be spending 20% of their time doing actual newsroom work, whatever that means. So out reporting, sitting in the newsroom, seeing how things, like, I don't know why, but when I came to Ringier, I really spent the whole day just asking them to show me how to upload a story into CMS, just from start to finish. I needed people not to tell me, well, not lies, but kind of try to impress me with something that is not true. So I really needed to understand how do I go about all of those things. And I think senior people really need to remember that. And we do have some positive examples about kind of reverse mentoring when young people mentor older people, but I think it's not enough. What really is enough is saying, can you go and upload a video for me just so you can remember how it is done, and you then can take decisions that will impact everybody else who is doing it properly.
Yeah.
So, but generally, I also am suggesting things about when you effectively saying that it's okay to know not to know things.
Yeah.
So you need to be relaxed, and you need to allow people to feel relaxed that they don't know certain things.
Yeah, and that's very difficult because all news organisations are under a huge amount of pressure, and the requirement to get your product out at the end of the day or continually is so tough that asking people then to think like an influencer or to be multimodal is tough.
Well, we have Sophia in the room, so I actually say that if you haven't downloaded Sophiana, you need to go and do it, because the way that app actually helps people to. I actually downloaded it and wanted to do the first TikTok myself. I never was on TikTok, and then I became afraid of comments, so I decided decided not to do it. But I think you need to be like some people already said early in the day that the education needs to be paid. You can't educate yourself in your own time. So you need to, every person needs to have an hour a week dedicated to self-improvement one way or another. Yeah. And I think it needs to become a policy. It needs to be probably even more than 1 hour.
Well, look, it was good enough for Google employees. They've got slightly more money than us, but
true. But I think it's important because you're still investing in yourself. You're actually saying that you're effectively putting your money.
And that's what I liked about the conversations this morning when people were talking about sandboxes and things like that. We're going to take a bit more time. Has anybody got any questions or comments to make? Oh, yeah, quite a lot. Can we start there, on the edge there? Try and keep it quite quick because there are drinks beckoning.
Sure, thank you very much. My name is Connie Tata. I'm from the Debrief Network in South Africa. So talk to me about the resistance, because the audience engagement people are generally people who don't even wear an editorial cap in terms of generally they don't apply their mind editorially. So once it's you make that editor appointment, then what about the fighting between who makes the ultimate editorial decision, in terms of responsibility? If you can just reflect a little bit on that.
You still have hierarchy. You still have the output editor who takes all the decisions. All I'm saying is that I think that the misnomer of audience engagement managers historically was that people didn't really care about the process of distribution. You basically were just saying somebody else create content, but it's not my job to think what happens with the content afterwards. And thankfully, forward-thinking organizations, FT with René Kaplan, BBC with Sarah Schenker, when we had those departments about 10 years ago already, they were there. And they were all editors. They were not just hired people to just go and distribute stuff. So because of that, I think it's really important to remember that those people, if you have hired people who have not been editorial before, upskill them so they become editorial. So for me, this is just a complete, the same thing.
But it's also about who's in the room, though, isn't it? Because to me, it's just kind of no-brainer that the audience person has to be integrated with editorial, because the audience is going to pay for your wonderful journalism. Your journalism has to relate to your audience, and so surely that's a...
Well, it's one of the things going back to user needs. I once did a client review when client had subscriptions already, and you see that again, client was creating lots of unneeded stories for people who are sign-in people wanted to give me perspective stories and educate me stories, but they were not getting enough of those. So the question is, like, where does this information where is it not passed on from, people who really understand it? And that's what I mean. Ideally, editor-in-chief will be somebody who will be equally versed with speaking to product, speaking to data, speaking to audience, speaking to commercial, all of that. That means that their beat editors who are responsible for individual output need to be equally versed as well. But editors-in-chief, I don't buy the argument that editors-in-chief are so busy that they don't pay attention to that. This is just completely crazy.
Yeah, and I love one of the things I like about the idea of things like chatbots, for example, is that there is a device. Yes, you're providing a service to your audience, but your audience is literally telling you what they're interested in, what they want to know. That seems to me...
Well, again, it's not about writing about Kardashians all the time. It's not about that. Like, whoever comes with this question, like, completely misses the point. Because we still have our own editorial mission. We still exist for a reason that we want to exist. But within that framework, you just need to try harder to be better.
Yeah. Another question.
I'd be really curious if you could tell about what you've learned when it comes to actually getting the newsroom to then, in their daily work, think about audience needs and really creating these stories that resonate. Because what I see is that you have a lot of meetings, you discuss a lot of things, but then in the actual day-to-day work, it can be very far away. And we've tried some tricks, but I would love to hear your history of what you figured out what actually makes a difference.
Just need to be a little bit stubborn and actually not move on to something else. And I think this is one of the problems in media is that there are so many priorities that people jump from one priority to another and they kind of keep their eyes off the ball to other priorities. So to your answer, to your question, I would say if your organization needs to produce 100 educate me stories every week, by the end of the week, I need to have a report on that. And I will start my morning meeting the following day without going into the new agenda, but actually tackling that question. In the same way how I would say, you as a radio correspondent, why didn't you give your text to online to redo it 15 years ago when we were merging radio and digital operations? And I would not go into the new conversations about the agenda of the day, but actually before tackling that one. So I think you just need to be a little bit single-minded like that. And it's like, okay, everybody does, not all the people like Jeff Bezos, but he has one sentence which I actually subscribe fully. He says, leaders need to be flexible, need to be stubborn on direction, but very flexible on details. So you just, like, where we go is up to no discussion. How we get there, let's discuss together.
Okay, any other questions? Anybody else? Got a few minutes. One right, one at the back there. Sorry, Astrid.
Hi. Dmitry, I think you asked this question in the morning. I may be mistaken. My conference brain is ending right now. But you asked the panelists what skills they're looking to hire for. So that's a question back to you. What skills do you look for in people?
So I specifically asked about traits rather than skills because skills can be taught. And I think that when it comes to traits, for me, flexibility is the most important one. Flexibility meaning that people should be open to try new things. And you know how I always say that the hardest promotion you can get is from producer to senior producer. then your career is already taken care of if you make that step properly, because actually a lot of people just don't want to take that step or don't know how to take that step, and this step is all about initiative and flexibility and showing that things can be done, and kind of also not shying away from trying things, because again you kind of do it and then you ask for forgiveness afterwards.
Right. Any others? Anybody else's brain not fried? Please. Here you are, Lakshmi.
Hi. So there's lots of journalism educators in a room, and I was just wondering if you were in charge of that, how would you advise us to really help the next generation think about the newsrooms?
Make sure that you have a user needs module in all of those, and I've done lots and lots of conversations with individual educational organizations, whether this side of the pond or the other side of the pond. You think you just need, it's as basic as who or whatever 5 W's in your first report. You just need to understand that there are X number of reasons why people consume news, and you need to tailor your reporting to reflect that. So this is the most important one. And second one is audience in the middle, always. And we need to learn from local as much as we can, because actually this is where the most interesting connection between audiences and journalists happen.
I mean, back to you, just from your experience of journalism education, is audience taught? I look at young content creators, and they are like super clever about audiences. You know, the kind of influencers, they just know exactly what their audience wants, when they want it, how they want it, and they work so hard at maintaining their connection to the audience. But do we actually teach audience at all in journalism?
I think not enough. I think we often learn quite a lot from the young people about the audiences they want to report to in a way we didn't before. I think that editors come in and advise about audiences, and that's really helpful. I don't think we wholesale think of audiences. We should probably flip the education to really concentrate on that. I think that's the point. I agree. I think I've had some students that have come in and gone and set up YouTube channels and speak to their audience in a much better way than I probably would have ever advised them to do so. But could they then flip that and talk to another audience? Perhaps not always, because they're very, very niche.
Yeah.
But you know, the flexibility comes in translating that, right? So that's what we kind of need to teach and get to. So
Great.
Good point. Yeah.
Thanks for that. We are going to stop there. I would love to go on all night, but brains are fried, and there is some sort of networking beverages out there in a minute or two. Thank you to everybody. I want to thank, big thanks first of all to my team, my JournalismAI team, who have once again been utterly brilliant. You know. And obviously thank you to all the speakers, all the people we've been working with who have shown what they've been doing, and especially thanks to you all for coming and making this such a really interesting day for me, at least. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Charlie.